and welcome to the One More Chapter Book Club. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you all doing? Do comment how you are and where you're joining us from today, as we'd love to hear from you. I'm very excited for our book club this afternoon, as I'm going to be joined by two incredible historical fiction authors, Adrienne Chin and Kathleen McGurl. Adrienne writes brilliantly descriptive and engrossing historical romance novels. Her first book was The Lost Letter from Morocco, and her latest is The English Wife. Kathleen is a USA Today best-selling author and is well known for her absolutely gripping historical fiction. Her latest novel is The Secret of the Chateau, and we shall particularly be discussing Adrienne and Kathleen's latest novels today. So it's going to be a super fascinating discussion, so please do tag any family or friends that you think would like to join in too, and especially if they're historical fiction fans. And also, of course, please ask us lots of questions as well. But for now, please help me in welcoming Adrienne and Kathleen. I shall just bring them in onto the screen. There we go. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Good to be here.
Yeah, how are you both?
All right.
Very good, thanks.
And where are you both coming to us live from? I always like to ask this question.
I'm down in Sussex. I'm down in Sussex today. Nice and sunny down here.
Yeah, I can see that light coming in.
Yeah. I mean, I even have the Venetian shutters shut, and it's still coming through. So
very nice. So what about you?
I'm on the south coast as well. I'm in Bournemouth, and we live really close to the beach. I was swimming at lunchtime today, so in the sea.
Is it warm enough?
It is warm enough, but it was really rough today, so I didn't swim for long. I had to get out. I couldn't swim against the current. So
amazing! So good to be able to get down there so quickly. Got quite a few people coming saying hello. Hi everyone. Gravesend in Kent from Wiltshire, Jersey. Lots of different places. Love to hear where you all are. So, first of all, we're here to discuss your two brilliant new novels. I'm so excited. The English Wife and The Secret of the Chateau, just two brilliant new books. To start us all off, I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit about your inspirations for both of these novels. Adrienne, would you like to go first?
Sure. This one, I was very much inspired. I wanted to write a book which had part of it in Newfoundland because I'm from there, and I just find it quite an interesting and evocative place that people don't really know that much about. So I wanted that. And I did have an aunt who was from Norwich, outside of Norwich, and she married my uncle, my Newfoundland uncle, who'd been over here in the war with the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. And so she was a war bride. And I just thought, well, she'd passed away a long time ago, as did he, but I liked that story, that idea. So that was inspiration for the backstory. And then I, made up the modern story where I wanted to bring in her niece, who was from London, on one of the planes that landed at Gander on 9/11, that was diverted to Gander. And then she looks up her aunt in her estranged aunt in Newfoundland. So those were the two things that inspired me for this book. Yeah.
Amazing. So it's kind of, there's sort of those moments of time that happened in history, or also your own personal history, and then they just inspired you for the actual story.
Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing. What about you, Kathleen? Is it a similar story or a bit different?
Well, with this one, The Secret of the Chateau, it was the contemporary story that came first. And the first chapter of it, which is a contemporary chapter, it starts with a group of friends who are all, funnily enough, around my age, and they're all getting a little bit drunk, and they come up with this idea to sell their houses. They're all on the point of retirement, or they've been made redundant. They decide to sell their houses, pool their resources, and buy a chateau in France. And I was basically writing from life then, with a group of old friends. That happened, and we got carried away that night with the idea of all communal living. From the age of sort of 60 onwards, and in a chateau in France. we actually ended up that night sort of Googling properties and deciding what we could afford and all the rest of it. And it didn't happen, but I thought, well, okay, it hasn't happened in real life, so I'll write about it. And then, I decided to set it in France. I decided to set it in a part of France I absolutely adore. And then the next thing was, okay, well, what historical story can I put with this? And the obvious thing for me felt like the French Revolution. So that's where the idea came from. And then I had to, build it around that.
To have that mystery take place.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, so two quite different inspiration stories there, which is fun. I like that. Because, you could think that sometimes it might just be, I don't know, it could be something similar, like, the sort of the type of the history you just liked, and then you wanted to do then you found the modern story later. But I like that both such different sort of inspiration stories there.
Some of my others have been like that I started with the historical story first, and I wanted to write about a particular thing, and then I have to come up with a contemporary story to fit around it. But this time it was the other way around.
Yeah, I love that. So we're talking about, obviously, the history, though, is so important in both of your books. I have a question here that actually I should have done this for the first one too. Bring it up on the screen as I enjoy this, so then everyone can see what we're talking about, no matter when they join in. So my question to you both is that there's rich historical detail in both your books. How did you approach your research? And I mean, for you both have written books prior to this one too. I guess it takes a long time doing the historical research, or yes, Adrian, would you like to go first?
Well, for this one, the historical part was the part in Norwich during World War II. So I did a lot of research online. I also went up and visited Norwich. A friend of mine lives there, so we went around for a long weekend and walked all over Old Norwich and just found locations that I would use for the book. Took lots of photographs, that kind of thing. And for the Newfoundland's side of things, there were sections of the Newfoundland story that went through the 40s and 50s and 60s where there were important historical things happening. So I did the research on those things, like when Newfoundland joined Canada in 1949. I had to get all of that right. So I did a lot. It's great. The internet's great now. You can find so much. So I did a lot of research on that.
Yeah. Does it take you quite a long time?
I research as I go, kind of, depending on what I'm doing, what I'm writing, and I will do a lot of research as I go along. And I have a big file that I put all the links in and everything like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What about you, Kathleen? How do you approach your research?
Well, with this one, Secret of the Chateau, I thought, French Revolution, we did that in school. I can remember. That's fine. And then I started looking into it a bit more and thought, I don't really remember enough about it. So, I bought a book and sort of trawled my way through that and jumped around on Wikipedia a lot as well, following links. And then the other thing that I did, which can't always do, but because I knew that I was going to be including Marie Antoinette and other real characters, I think my camera's going a bit funny. Sorry about the flickering. I bought a book, a Jean Plaidy novel about Marie Antoinette, because I know that she researched really well, and then it's such fun just reading what she's written, and then that sort of gave me ideas to then go and follow up and find the detail about some of the events that she'd written about. And so, it's a mixture. I mean, I like reading historical novels as part of my own research, and then sort of following up to find out how much of what they wrote was true and what I can put into my novels as well. So it's a mixture of stuff, but some of them, I mean, one of my others, The Forgotten Secret, is the Irish War of Independence, and my husband's Irish, so again I thought, I know a bit about this, but when I started writing, I realised that I just didn't understand what was going on enough, and I had to do a load of background reading on that one. So it's like being back at school sometimes.
But I guess presumably you both love history and love doing that kind of research.
Yeah. My undergraduate degree was English and history, so yeah, I don't mind at all. I enjoy it.
Yeah, so that's what the degree prepared you for, really, to be your future
historical writer.
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting. Do you find, like, how long would you say it does, before you do your research before you kind of start writing? Or is it, you all kind of like what both have mentioned, like you kind of start writing and then you're like, do I need to do a bit more research? Is it,
well, for this one, I mean, I started researching in January, in the beginning of January, and started writing about the third week of January, and just kept researching as I was writing. And I was working at the same time, so I was writing on weekends, and I took 2 days off a week to write as well. So it was all kind of squashed into the time.
I feel like that's very quick, like tight turnaround. What about you, Kathleen? I guess you have quite quick turnarounds as well.
I think on this one I probably spent about a month when I was sort of planning the novel and researching. Probably about a month, and I'm a full-time author now. Well, I say full-time. Apart from with the coronavirus going on, I'm normally traveling a lot, so I'm normally sort of full-time traveler with writing on the side. But so when I was writing Secret of the Chateau last year, I think I spent about a month on the research and planning, and then got stuck into the writing.
Were you in the chateau? Were you in a chateau when you were doing that? Were you traveling there?
No, we were in our motorhome, which is we like to live in the motorhome for part of each year when we can. And I was traveling around, and every now and then we'd come across a chateau, and I'd have to jump out and take a photo.
Amazing. I love that. It's fun. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So did you both? You I guess because you both have such amazing settings in your books as well. It's actually, I think, one of my questions here, which I will bring up now. 2 seconds. So my question is that both of your books have amazingly rich settings and beautiful locations, both in the past and present day. How do you research and create these settings specifically? So I guess a little bit different to your, historical research, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to Newfoundland for a month, the month of middle of May to middle of June last year, and stayed with relatives across the island, and rented a car and did a lot of driving around looking for inspirational locations, took lots of photos, did a lot of writing as well. Just spoke to my cousin in St. John's, who I stayed with, whose mother was the one who'd been the war bride, so she was able to tell me more about that too. I couldn't have written the book without going back and spending a good period of time there. Although, I've been back and forth over the years, it was really nice to just have a whole month. And it was iceberg season too, which is amazing there because there were so many icebergs around. Wow. And that's really evocative as well in Wales and the whole thing. And I just felt I could bring that into the book, it was so fresh.
Yeah, you absolutely feel it's just very visceral. That's what I love about both your books. You just feel like you're, in those places, and just it's just such an amazing mix of the history and, the setting. And so, I mean, obviously there's a big, there's lots of everything else going on too, but you almost, not that you're on holiday, but you can imagine like yourself in those places. And I just, Anyway, how about you, Kathleen? I went on a slight tangent there.
Yeah, well, as I said, this book, The Secret of the Chateau, I'd had the idea for it on a trip in the motorhome to the Loire Valley in 2018. And then in 2019, we had an extended trip to France because I'd given up the day job by then. So we went off in the motorhome and we went down to the Alpes Maritime area, which it's the bit near Italy that is squashed between the Alps and the Mediterranean. So it's beautiful. So you can be, standing on a hill, looking at the snowy Alps in one direction and the Mediterranean Sea in the other direction.
Mm.
And although it's not really chateau country, there are some chateaus around, and I decided I'm setting my novel here because why not, you know? And we were traveling around that area for about 2 months last spring. And we should have been there again this spring, but and we just had such a lovely time. It's such a beautiful area that I decided to set it there, and I felt I could bring the descriptions of the area alive because I was there. So some of the walks that my character does in the hills, they're walks that I did, and I love. I have to say, I love writing about mountain walks. I really do.
Yeah. But then it brings that sense of that realism, and because you've both experienced what your characters are experiencing as well.
Yeah.
And then you get to go to these great locations. So I think
that's a really nice thing. I've been missing that. I've been missing that in the last 3 months. I've had to do a lot of virtual traveling online for the book I'm writing. So.
Yeah, it's not the same, is it?
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
Yeah, it's been hard. So we've got lots of questions here, so I'm going to start bringing some of them up from people. Thank you for all your questions. So Terry asked, she would like to know if you are plotters or pantsers. A very good question. What would you say? Adrian, would you like to go first again?
Well, that's a good question. I do plot now, and I've got this wonderful book that I found through some writer thread that I was on called "Take Off Your Pants," and it's by it's by a writer, and it's not a very long book, but she really is very clear about how to plot your novel and the different beats that you need to hit through the novel and all of that. So I've been really using that as a template to structure the novel, because that's the thing I find the most difficult, is just getting the structure nice and solid. So that's been really helpful. It's just very simple and clear, and I'm just making sure to follow that skeleton. So I do that, and I outline and all the rest. But then I do like the freedom of writing freely around the skeleton. I don't like to plot every scene and all of that, because I would find that boring.
Not as missing the excitement of like what's going to happen.
I've got the skeleton, but I like to pad it out in a creative way, whatever inspires me.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Kathleen?
Probably quite similar, really. I plot to an extent. I will always start with I'm expecting to write 31 chapters, and I'm expecting chapter 1 to be contemporary and chapter 31 to be contemporary, and to alternate in between. And then you've got to get the stories to weave together. So I think with dual timeline, you can't, it's hard to just start and write and see where it goes, because you've got to get those two stories to weave together.
That's right.
So I will, up front, I will write a couple of sentences for each chapter, what I expect to happen. And I'm always hoping that there'll be a couple of scenes, or at least a really big scene that will fill a whole chapter. So I will to that extent, but I don't go down to the last detail. And then I wait and see when I get there. And then sometimes I find that my notes for a chapter say, there's more of this stuff going on, or she starts to fall in love, or whatever it is, and I think, oh yeah, but how and why? And then you've got the creativity. I mean, sometimes I curse myself. I get to that point and think, oh no, what am I going to write?
This doesn't make sense now. But actually,
something will come.
Yeah, you both meant, obviously you're both writing dual narratives. That just seems like a very, perhaps even more difficult than a linear narrative. How do you, how does that work in your planning as well? Do you automatically plan out like this chapter's, that, or it's kind of you weave it in later?
I'm trying to think. I mean, the one I'm doing right now, I'm kind of working them. I plotted out both of the stories kind of at the same time. Whereas the English Wife, I definitely plotted out and wrote the historical bit first, because I was in England. And I had written the contemporary chapter where my character gets off the plane in Newfoundland, so I knew that one, and I knew I had to end with her, just like you were saying, Kathleen, the contemporary. Yeah. But then I put that story aside until I went to Newfoundland and spent January through March just writing the World War II story, and I wrote that and had that done, and then I went to Newfoundland and wrote the Newfoundland story. That's how I did.
Yeah, so you kind of had to merge them in together.
And then I wove them. Yes.
It's like, yeah, it's amazing. It's like, you know, sewing, weaving. It's very
knitting a novel.
Yeah, knitting a novel, exactly. I think that's what dual timelines. Love it. What about you, Kathleen?
Well, I do that planning by a couple of sentences per chapter, and I know that each whole chapter will be one timeline or the other. And then I write the first few chapters. I write about the first 3 chapters in order. So I get myself into the book. Yeah. And then I push ahead on the historical story, and I write the whole of the historical story to the end. And then I come back and write the contemporary story to the end. And it's partly because I always find the contemporary harder, because there's more to weave in, because they need their own story that has to, you know, work with the historical story in, you know, be the same theme or whatever.
Yeah.
And they've also got to be investigating what happened in the past. So they've got to come across that mystery and they've got to solve it, but not too soon, because you know, otherwise it's spoilers for the historical story. Yeah. So I think one novel I wrote, I tried it the other way around. In fact, it was The Forgotten Secret, the Irish War of Independence one. And because I hadn't done enough research, I decided to write the contemporary story first. And then I got to the point where my characters needed to solve the mystery from the past, and they couldn't because I didn't know what it was, because I hadn't written it. So then I had to go back and write the historical story. And honestly, I nearly threw that novel away. I was like 75% of it was written, and I nearly threw it away and said, I can't do this. But so since then, I've always written the historical first, you know, get the research done, get that written, and then I know what's going on then, and I know what my contemporary characters need to discover and how they're going to go about it. It works so much better.
Really interesting. Do you always write in that same way too, Adrian, or is it just?
Well, that's how I wrote The English Wife, but that's not how I'm writing the one now, which is set in World War I, and also in 1892 Italy. So I'm kind of writing them at the same time. You know, I'll write an World War I chapter, and then I'll write an 1892 chapter. It's just the way this was. Yeah. But I wrote The English Wife the way that you said, Kathleen. Yeah. One, the historical first, and then the contemporary.
I did one of my old ones, as Adrian's writing now, just in the finished order. I can't remember which one now, but I know one of them I did. But I didn't like the, you know, constantly going back and forth between different sets of characters.
It does your head in a little bit.
It does.
Yes. It's like, oh, where am I today?
Really interesting to hear different approaches. I think that's really helpful to like understand the process. We've got lots more questions here too, so I'm going to keep them coming. This is a great question from Fiona. Have you got a favorite period in history? That is a hard question. I want to ask everyone out there as well, can you like comment your favorite period in history, because that is a tough question. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I like mid-Victorian. I like because there's dual timeline and there's mysteries to be solved, and there's often a genealogy element. I like being in the mid-Victorian era, because then you've got the compulsory registration of births, marriages and deaths started in 1837, and the first full census was 1841. So if you set something in about 1860, your characters have got a fighting chance of finding out about the ancestors, and you can use all that. And I like that period. I like, you know, it was industrialization. There was the railways being built, and so people could get around. And yeah, but you still got that sort of Dickensian darkness that you can write
Yeah,
about.
okay.
So, although having said that, I also like writing about the 1930s, 20s, 30s between the wars.
Between the wars, a very interesting time as
Mm.
well. Yeah, so many interesting time periods. What about you, Adrian?
I'm really a 20th century woman. I like all right from 1900 through. So the one I'm doing right now starts in 1913. We'll go to 1919 and 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. Writing a bit about the 50s, 60s. I like 70s, 80s. Last one. So any time in the 20th century, I'll take that.
80s aren't historical.
So much happened in the 20th century. It's just
80s about 2 years ago.
What's that?
80s are not historical. They're only about 5 or 6
I
years
know,
ago.
but it was the historical bit. I know. I was already graduated from university, but that was the historical bit in the last letter.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like when does something become the history?
Be 100 years, I think.
100 years.
But I think it's shorter than that, but it should be 100.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've got some. Karen says that World War One and World War Two, very interesting periods. And Kerry says my favourite would have to be the Cold War years behind the Iron Curtain.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so I just find that with I just love all the spy stuff basically at that time. It's just so fascinating. There's an abundance of movies and films and books about that era, but so fascinating as well, isn't it? So many. I just love history. So many great times. Well, interesting times, not necessarily great. Which is true. Julie asks us if you can meet anyone from history, who would you choose and why? That was a great question, Julie. And everyone out there, please comment your thoughts too. Who would like to go first?
Adrian.
Gosh.
I need to think.
There's so many people that would be interesting. I can't just say one person, there's so many people. Sarah Bernhardt, I think, would be really interesting, the French actress. She was quite something. First woman to play Hamlet and all the rest. She would be interesting. Oscar Wilde, I would love to meet him. Einstein, there's so many, just they're all interesting. And I love, I've always loved the movie Lawrence of Arabia, so I'd love to meet T.E. Lawrence and lots of people.
There's so many people.
I have thought of one now.
What's
I think for me it would be Constance Markievicz. She was an Anglo-Irish woman who got very much involved in the Irish War of Independence, and she's got the name Markievicz because she married a Polish count. She was sort of aristocracy. And I researched her quite a lot for the Forgotten Secret, the War of Independence one. She's a fascinating character. And I've got an idea to write another Irish book, which I think she will feature in herself. So, I think I'd like to meet her. She, as a young woman, she was kind of a rebel without a cause. And she messed around with suffragism for a while. She was a suffragette, and then she picked up the Irish freedom gauntlet, really. And at one point in the 1916 Easter uprising, she was there in the middle of Dublin firing a pistol at English soldiers. So she was right there in the heart of it. Fascinating character. She was also the first woman ever to be elected to Parliament in the 1918 election. She never took her seat because she was in prison at the time. And also she was Sinn Féin, so she wouldn't have taken it anyway.
Yeah, I remember because I went to Dublin just before all of this happened, and I remember walking around the square and seeing there's quite a lot of stuff about her in that square.
Yes, well, there's a bust of her, I think, in St Stephen's Green. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. St Stephen's Green. That's what I was like.
That's what you're thinking of. Yeah.
Amazing. Claire said the 6 wives of Henry VIII would be mine. All of them don't mind so much about Henry. I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, yeah, for me, when I think about it, very far back history that, about, certain women in history that we don't know that much about either, or didn't write that much. Like, for instance, like Margaret Tudor, like Henry VIII's sister, who married the king of Scotland at the time, and there's just not that much about her, but she basically like takes over like Scotland for a while and everything. And I think it'd be great to, if we could go back in time and chat to these women that don't have that much written about them as well.
Yeah.
Basically. Anyway, we've got some more questions here, which I keep going through. Karen asks, what books have you enjoyed reading during lockdown? If either of you have, I know that some people, I've been, sometimes it's been a bit of a struggle to read as well. Like, we've, my team, we've had quite a few conversations about, I've been, other than on top of reading for work, don't worry, but reading for pleasure, it's been a bit hard to concentrate on other things, hasn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, I found it hard to read fiction. I actually find it hard to read fiction when I'm writing, because I've already got all these characters in my head, and I do so much reading for research and writing during the day that I kind of I don't have space in my head to read fiction at night. So but I have read a couple of books in lockdown. The one I just finished is In the Midst of Winter by Isabel Allende. But it took me like 3 months to read it. I just was reading 1 page a day. I was just really slow with the reading. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a bit hard. What about Kathleen?
No, I've been reading a lot.
Okay.
I always have an upstairs book and a downstairs book on the go at all times. And I just finished yesterday reading a really good one, The Echoes of the Runes by Christina Courtenay, and that's dual timeline, and it's Viking. So you've got Viking, and so it's great. It really is great. I can really recommend that one. And the other good, I read Where the Crawdads Sing.
I haven't read that yet. It's on my list. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful, that book. Really beautiful. Yeah, so I loved that.
Sounds like, and I love the cover as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you read a lot of historical fiction books as well? Both of you.
What kind of?
You read a lot of historical fiction books too. Like, would you say that's your favorite genre of reading as well as, obviously writing?
My favorite to read is Dual Timeline, definitely, and that's why I write it, because it's my favorite to read. But I tend to read a real variety. I'll jump around and read anything that's kicking around, really. So it's not. So I don't read historical and nothing else. I read a variety. But yes, I like historical and particularly Dual Timeline best.
Yeah.
I'm like Kathleen. I read a lot of different things, and I do jump around quite a bit. I mean, I have a huge stack of books by my bed, and I have about 6 that I'm dipping into at any given time. That's probably why it takes so long to finish anything. But and the historical, I'm rereading Anya Seton's Green Darkness right now. I really liked that when I first read it, and I'm rereading that again. And I like reading contemporary literature as well. Liane Moriarty, I've been reading some of her stuff, which is great fun, really fresh, which is nice counterbalance to the more historical things. So I'm very eclectic reader. Yeah.
A great range. Love it. Fiona's asked, what is a typical writing day like for you? Do you work set hours? Kathleen, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, since I gave up the day job last year, I don't think there is such a thing as a typical writing day. And it's a great thing about being self-employed. You can write, work when you want to work. Having said that, I try and use the hours that I know that I'm going to work best is the middle of the day. I'm useless in the morning. So there's no point even trying to start before about 11 o'clock. So I'll do the housework or whatever before then. And now that I don't have to write in the evenings that I used to, I prefer to write in the middle of the day. So I suppose if there's such a thing as a typical day, I'll write from about 11 till 3, 4, maybe.
Yeah.
And so, but it's not set hours, no. And it depends what stage of the writing process I'm at. If I'm trying to write a first draft, I will try and do quite a number of hours, as many days as possible. But then if we're travelling in the motorhome, I'll probably write later in the afternoon, between about 4 and 6. We'll go out for the day, and then I'll do a couple of hours later. So it does vary.
Yeah, so
I'm a middle of the day. I'm a middle of the day person as well. That's I start around 11. Same thing. I do other things in the morning. Get up around 7 and do stuff. And I'll write till about 5. I try to get about 1,000 words done a day. Yeah, that's kind of what I aim for. Right now in the lockdown, I've been writing full time, so I've been writing about 6 days a week. So from about 11 till 5, and and then when I'm not in lockdown and I'm doing other kind of work, it's the same thing. It's pretty much my routine, about 11 till 5. I've never been really good at writing at night, so that's when I'm most productive. Yeah, middle of the day.
Yeah. Do you think it's important to have? I mean, I guess you don't. You both mentioned that you don't necessarily say this is definitely my set hours, but do you think it's important to have a bit of a structure in that same way?
Yeah, I have one of the big, calendars where you can see the whole year, and I kind of work out month by month the date my writing days, and and I write down at the end of each day how many pages I'm up to. And that's a really good visual thing because it keeps me focused on the end point. Because you have to make your own structure. There's nobody there cracking a whip. So you have to be quite disciplined about it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's not so much the set hours. It's about, as you just said, discipline. And for when first drafting, I think it's all about forward momentum, just trying to keep those words coming out. 1,000 a day, if you can do that 6 days a week, that's 6,000 a week, which is great. I
get there.
Try and do, because I used to do, when I had a day job, I was doing 5,000 a week. So I tell myself that now I ought to be able to do 10,000 a week because I'm, only writing. So that's what I'll sort of aim for, and I'll aim to get that first draft out, get it written down, even if it's complete rubbish, like the one I need to pick up tomorrow and start editing. I know that it is a complete and utter mess, and no way is it going anywhere near my editor until I've done a lot of work to it. But I've got something there. You can't edit a blank page, as they say. So I've got something down.
I like the editing. I find the editing really creative and fun. It's the first draft that's the hard one. I like editing. I don't mind it at all.
When I'm first drafting, I like the editing process. When I'm editing, I like first drafting.
Code switches. I love that. So actually, I've got one of my questions that I've written down as well, which we haven't actually covered yet. So I'm going to ask you this now, which is a bit more about the dual timelines in both of your books. And I just love how they move between the present and the modern and the past. And it just, as I was talked about before, it just keeps that sense of mystery going for me as a reader. But why did you choose to tell your stories in this way? Love to hear more about that. Adrian, would you like to go first?
Well, I really love the novel form. I just really love writing novels because you can really explore the past and the present and the future and dreams and letters and thoughts and all of these things in a novel. You don't have to make it just a linear story. So I really like playing with what you can do in a novel with all of those things. So that's why I'm quite drawn to doing Timeslip, because you can really explore different places and different characters, and I find it just really interesting to write. That's why I do it.
Love that. What about you, Kathleen?
Well, it's quite simple. It's because they were my favourite books to read, and I was really liked Kate Morton and Catherine Webb, their novels in particular. And I thought, well, why don't I have a go at writing? I had already written a historical, just pure historical, and then I thought, why don't I have a go at writing a dual timeline of the type I love? And it was hard work because you've got to come up with 2 stories and you've got to weave them together, and you've got to, thematically it needs to tie in. So there's a lot of elements to it, but I love that sort of jigsaw puzzle feel that you get. And and it's an intellectual exercise coming up with a plot that works with the 2 timelines and everything. And so, sometimes I curse myself, as I said with Forgotten Secret, but most of the time I absolutely love doing it. Yeah, and they're still what I like to read most.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
I'll just keep at them.
Yeah. Really interesting. So my next question for you both, which kind of ties into this too, which I think is important to ask, is what are you working on now? Always, I'm sure you both are, always exciting to hear what's coming up next. Kathleen, would you like to go first?
So I've just sent an edited version of my latest book to my editor. We had a little discussion on titles. I don't know that I'm supposed to say yet though what the title is, but it's dual timeline. It's coming out later this year, probably towards the end of the year. It's just set sort of in southern England, really. It's not so much a great setting, but it's all based around sort of who do you think you are, and whether it's nature or nurture that makes you the person that you really are. And there's a lot of twists in it, a lot of, maybe people aren't quite who they thought they were all the way through. So that was a fun one to write. And that one, so that's probably about to go to copy edit, so it's almost done. And then tomorrow I'm picking up another novel, which is, it's got the Titanic in it, but not just the Titanic. It's also got Titanic's 2 sister ships, the Olympic and the Britannic. So that was a fun one to write. So I kept sinking ships in it. It was great.
Yeah, amazing. Sorry, what's the history in the first one that you mentioned you were working on?
It's sort of a family history. So there's no sort of big world events going on. It's a family history, and somebody ends up going to prison for something they didn't do. So I researched Victorian prisons a lot for that one, which was fun.
Not the best place to be.
No.
You don't
want to be in a Victorian prison.
No, it sounds super fascinating though. Excited. What about you, Adrian?
Yeah, I'm about 3/4 of the way through my World War I novel about 3 sisters from London, and basically it's how they are moving towards empowerment and self-actualization. So many things changed for women in those years, so it's really showing how they go in very different directions. There's one becomes an army nurse, goes to Gallipoli, Egypt. I had a great aunt who did that. So the 3 women are very much inspired by 2 of my great aunts and my grandmother. Not exactly what they did, but I have their photographs and all of that. So I visualizing them as the characters, but creating different stories. And there's stuff in Germany, there's stuff in Italy, backstory in Italy with their mother. So a lot of that, but it's basically the theme is about women's these young women really discovering who they are and moving forward in life in a different way from the women before them. Which is so important. And I guess they're both of in that sense, both of those books that you're working, it's kind of about looking at that family history and then and then like what you can learn from that and what you can take forward as well, right? Which is really interesting.
Excited for both of these books.
I can't wait until I can get to Italy and do my Italian research. I'm having been doing it online. I'm going, no, I really want to go. So.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to. Yeah, not too long. Hopefully. But actually now, so I've got a couple of final discussion questions for all of us, which I think are always fun to end on. So everyone out there, please lend your thoughts too to our discussion. But kind of, why, we do love historical fiction, all of us here, and so it's an ever popular genre. But why do you think that we do love it so much? To both of you.
Well, I think all novels take you to a different place, and historical will take you to a different time as well. And what's that old phrase about the past is a different country?
Yeah.
And I think we all like to be transported when we read. And for me, being transported back in time to learn something about that time and to be with those characters where, and sometimes the mysteries are more fun when you can't just solve them by looking something up on Google or using a mobile phone or whatever. It's lovely to be, back in a time where if you needed to communicate with someone who lived miles away, you had to send a letter, and it was going to take a day or two to get there and a day or two for a reply to get back. If you wanted to travel somewhere, it's going to take time. And yeah, I like the difference, the fact that it's different to what we currently have. That's what it is for me. I'd love to hear what other people think.
Yeah. What do you think, Adrian?
I think it makes history accessible for people as well, rather than just reading history textbooks.
Totally.
It brings it alive and makes it not feel so dusty and far away. It really brings these people alive. You realize your connection with all the previous generations. So that's why I like it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. I think, I just love that you can bring the characters from a certain time, like alive through history. And even if either they, are real people in history and you're maybe learning something new, or even if they're not, but they're sort of, you can imagine that character in that time. I think you just, I personally anyway, learn, I think, so much more about history through an imagined person. And that's the same thing that why I love, if you read a classic or something as well, because you're getting the feelings of those times as well.
Yes.
So I think great. So my final question to you both, which I always end on, and it's kind of a tricky one, but I ask it nonetheless. And it is, what would you say about the books when pressing them into someone else's hands? Not a trick question.
I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for buying it. I hope you enjoy it.
I don't know. I suppose I'd say, if you like it, tell me, and if you don't, just keep quiet.
Yeah.
I love it. What about you, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, really, you have no control over it once somebody is reading it, and you just hope that they get something from it, that they enjoy it. And if they don't like it, I'd really rather not know.
That is no. Yeah, well, I guess I'm probably a best person to answer it as they're both obviously your books, but I would sharing these books with everyone, that just if you want to, as we're talking about, lose yourself in a beautiful, beautiful settings, beautiful historical time period, but also have those sense of mystery. It's literally, if you love reading, if you love any kind of novel, then you'll love these books, because they basically deliver everything. So that is what I would say. That was my little something. We've got a question, a comment here from Maria. Sometimes I read them for pure escapism. Other times it is for that Sunday feeling. I have won many a quiz night on random knowledge from a historical romance. Exactly.
That's brilliant.
I love learning things, and I love trivia. So that's one of the reasons I do like writing these things. You learn so much in the research. You go, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I can use that when I play Trivial Pursuit someday.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's another one. It's just that if you want to like really enjoy something, but also feel like you're learning something, then that's another good.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of our book club. But thank you so much to you both for joining us. It was such a fun chat. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank
you very much. That's lovely.
So I'm going to disappear Adrian and Kathleen away now. So we'll say goodbye to them, and then I'll just give you a little goodbye to everyone else out there too. But thank you so much to you both again.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Amazing. I'll just hear that question. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It was just super fascinating to hear from two such brilliant historical fiction authors, and about how they hone their craft and how they come up with all their research. It's just such a fascinating genre. I think for me, I don't know. I just think that it literally encompasses everything. So if you've never read a historical fiction book, you literally must. And I think that both of these would be the best place to start. So thank you so much again for joining us. Just all I'm going to say is that please keep your eyes peeled for announcements on our social channels about our book club next week. We will have something extra special in store to reward your patience. So just keep your eyes out. But for now, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.